Okay, last night I ended up finishing up the underskirt for this dress. Here is Kyla wearing it. I ended up, instead of doing that line of sewing across here, I did a whip stitch to sew down the waistband so you wouldn't see that line of sewing. So anyway, there's your front box pleat. Here is the sides of the underskirt, the other side, and this is where you would have your side seams if you followed the pattern. In my case, I just did put the seam in the back with a Velcro closure, and that was how I finished that off. I went ahead and put a little bit of a hem in this one. I didn't turn it under, I just did a overcast stitch, and then I just whip stitched it so you couldn't, tried to do an invisible stitch so you couldn't see too much of the actual sewing. But I think that this is going to be long enough. Once she puts on her pumps or her shoes or whatever she's going to wear, I think this will be fine with the overskirt. I went ahead and changed my lace choice again. I went with a thicker lace. For the rest of the dress, I went with this floral design, but for the lace around the neck, you only want, the pattern calls for 5/8 of an inch. I didn't want that small of a neckline, so what I did is I went with about 1.25 inch thickness for my lace, and this is what I'm going to use to put around the top bodice. And then as far as the sleeves go, I can go a little bit bigger so the lace will hang down further. So that's what I did last night. So let's go ahead and get started on the beginning of the bodice. So let's put her somewhere else. Okay, so if you go to your instructions, step 1 is taking the sides of your bodice and putting your pieces together. So this is one side piece. Here's my bodice back, and let me see where my other side piece is here. Okay, and here is my other side piece. So step 1 is to take your sides and sew them to the back of your bodice. Let me take these pieces off. Okay. So let me get my machine ready. I wasn't even set up yet. Okay. So step 1 is to take this, and we're going to put the right sides together, and we're going to sew these together. Okay, so there is no little notch on here, but if you cut the pattern, let me get the pattern out. If you would have cut the notches out, you would have had that side notch, so you would have known that that was going to fit on the back piece. It would have had a notch there. I didn't do it because I did it on the back piece, so I don't know why I did it, but I usually don't. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that in. I'm set up for about 1/4 inch from the edge. So let's go ahead and start this. Take your pin out, pick it up and turn it a little bit. You are on a curve, so oh, I didn't even check the camera. I hope you can see. Let me bring it around. Okay. Okay, backspace it. And trim. Okay, so that is the first step on the back of your bodice. Not very well organized today, am I? Let's see if I can find my... There they are. Okay, so we're going to do the other side also. Put the other side on. The wind is just howling like crazy out there. Okay, so let's do the same thing on the opposite side. Now this one had a... I don't know how that happened. I cut one notch out and the other notch I didn't. My goodness, is it windy. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we've got our two sides on. This is your bodice back and your two side straps. Okay, so it's at this point where we are going to put in our shoulder seams. So make sure you don't use your facing, but use your actual shoulder seams, which is your front of your bodice. Once we put the front on, then we can move on to the lace. Okay, so here's the two pieces for the front. So let's start with one side. Okay, so this is going to go on to the front, because this one here is going to sew there when we actually put the bodice together. So let's go ahead and line those up. This is what we're going to put together so we can get that lace around the neckline. Okay, so there's the one side. It almost looks like a vest. Okay, let me do the other one while we're doing it. So this one's on this side here. And they have that lined up so that when you actually put that sewing in there, it's going to line up when you open it up. It might be a little off, but it should be pretty close if you do 1/4 inch seams. Okay, let's try that one. Okay. There's one side. Let's do the other side. Don't do the side seams because we have to put the lace on first. Okay, now as far as finishing your seams, you can if you want to. The thing with this, you know, if you sew, they're going to tell you to clip this and then iron it open. When I did mine, it seemed so much easier if you just turned it to one side. Let's see what I show you what I mean. I did the overlock here, and I would have done the overlock here. But what you want to do is on this side seam, you want all your seams to go to one side. So I'm going to go ahead and overlock that together so it stays together. But when we put the sleeve in, we're going to push it to one direction. And the reason for that is because I think you don't want it the opposite way. You want that seam to go to one side. I wouldn't spread it open, but you know, that's just my preference. So I'm going to go ahead and overlock those two sides. Find my overlock stitch. Okay. So I'm just going to use one of my overlock stitches, and I'm going to make it more narrow. I don't want it that wide. Okay, so I'm just going to overlock those two side seams. And that's just to prevent this fabric from fraying. I should have just cut that little notch off. I put it on one side but not the other. Okay, so when I go to sew my sleeve on, that's going to stay in that same location, in that direction, since I've just overlocked it. Now I don't have to worry about that, any fraying on that side. So let me go ahead and cut these notches off too. And then I'm going to just go ahead and overlock this side. Like I said, my preference, it's if you want to do like they would tell you to do, cut it and then iron it open. Okay. Okay, so there we go. We've got that, that, and that. Now as far as the top sleeves, I didn't overlock those. I just pressed them open, finger pressed them open when I put the lace on. Okay, so I just finger press the shoulder seams open. This is a nice thick cotton. It's probably not even going to fray anyway, but let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we've got our two side seams going. We've got our two shoulder seams, and now we're getting ready to put the lace on. If you look at the real pattern, you will see here there is a little dot. This is your stomacher placement, but also there is a little dot where your lace is supposed to come down, where the notch is, because it'll tell you on the instructions, it'll say pin the lace between the notches on the front. So that would be this notch all the way around to the other notch. So that's why I put that notch in. So that's where we're going to insert the lace around the neck. Now if you'll look at this one that I did, if I would have put my lace on with the edges raw, you would have had a raw edge of lace right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some gathering stitches in here, but also what we're going to do is we're going to turn this down after we've got, this is where we're going to put our lace. So we want that to be inserted this way. Well, it'll be on the opposite side. Let me do it so you can see what I mean. Let's go to a gathering stitch. If you've ever, because we have cut this lace down, it's not going to fray. I mean, lace very rarely, it's so synthetic nowadays that it will rarely fray. So let's go ahead and decide if we want both of our edges to be the same. This is about 20 inches of lace. So let's go ahead and cut that off, so that when we do on both sides, we'll have the same amount of lace on each side of the bodice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two gathers of lace, and the reason I'm doing that is because you get a much nicer gather when you have two rows of gathering thread. So let me. And another thing you want is you want to have your thread so that you can pull it. So if you have a machine that automatically doesn't give you any thread on the bottom, you're going to want to pull that back out of your bobbin so that you have enough thread to pull. Otherwise it'll be really narrow and it'll be hard to find it. Okay, so I'm going to change it because I want my I want to be all the way to the right on my gathering stitch, because I don't want any of my gathering stitches to show when I go to add my lace. So let's go ahead and start with our first one. We're going to do our first one right at the very edge, and this is going to be a gathering stitch. You can do, if you prefer just one row of gathering stitches, go ahead and just use one row. I think you get a nicer gather with two, but that's just my personal preference. Okay, don't use your cut. Go ahead and just lift up, pull your thread out, and give yourself some gathering room. Okay, so you can use just one row of gathering if that's what you prefer. I kind of like the, this will probably work with just one, but I'm going to do two just so you can see. So now I'm going to go to 6.5, so I have another row next to the other one. Try not to get your stitches over the previous row, because if you do, it's going to catch it and tangle it, and you're not going to be able to use that gathering stitch. Okay. Okay, so we have just made 2 rows of gathering stitches on our lace. And it gathered quite a bit as it was already. So we're going to need this to be, so if you take your 2 notches and you line up your lace, you're going to know how many gathers you're going to need to, how much you're going to need to pull that lace to get it to fit. So we need to get we need to lose only about this much inches on the, about 1, 2, 3, 4 inches left to gather up. Okay, so go ahead and take your 2 stitches. It did a lot of gathering all by itself on this machine with the gathering stitch. Okay, so let's just take the top 2. Always pull from the same side. Do you see what you get when you do 2 rows at the same time? You get a really nice gather. It's much nicer than one, and it holds your so you don't get big bunches of gathers when you do that. I just prefer it myself. Okay, I don't want to go too far on this. Yeah, I'm up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this down to the size that I need to go around the neck, and then I'll come back and we will actually attach the lace to the bodice.